Right then, we've made an eccentric cam to convert the giant wheel's rotary force into a backwards and forwards motion. This is very exciting, but how should we use that backwards and forward motion to cut up pieces of wood? Of course, there are many ways to do this, but I was particularly taken by a 1930s shingle maker from Sweden. It's on this channel, Yesterday's Machinery. I'll put a link to the video in the description, and I suggest you go and have a look at it because you'll like it, promise. It's a fine old machine driven by a fine old diesel engine, and I'm deeply jealous of both. Shingles are slices of wood that can be used like slates on a roof, if you live in a drier country than we do, of course. This machine uses a knife blade running back and forth to slice shingles off a log, much like a vegetable mandolin, but much bigger. And I thought I'd have a go at making one myself. How hard can it be? So first of all, I made a heavy table frame using the biggest and heaviest lumps of steel I could find. And they were very heavy, but just wait and see what happens to it later on. Then we'll help make a carriage that slides freely inside some channel.
Smooth.
Lovely.
Bit of grease.
You know, that's 2 mil too high.
This side is.
Yeah. Do you approve of the new helmet? Well,
I do. I strongly approve.
okay, good. So it might look fairly crude, but the materials were free, and I'm hoping it will be strong enough. This will hold the blade. Now, the main reason I chose this sort of machine is because Mick gave me this lovely blade last year, and I've been itching to use it. It was propping open his workshop door, and I found a concrete block to replace it. Maybe you know what it was made for originally? I don't know. Something very solid anyway. It had been broken once and repaired, so I cut it off at that place. It's made of something very hard because it took an inch off my cutting disc just to do that. And after that, we spent a few hours getting an edge back onto it.
It's got a bit of an edge to it. I mainly just took out the hump here.
You could shave your legs with that.
Yeah.
If you wanted to. And then we mounted it to the carriage. So far, so good. The log is held between a front stop and a back stop. I experimented with them and quickly realized that they need to just skim over the top of the blade, and that meant the carriage had to be rebuilt so it wouldn't foul them. The blade has to pass under the stops on both the outstroke and the end stroke. I used a spacer to set the depth of the cut, in this case 6mm. This sets the floor height in front of the blade. The log can drop down 6mm once the blade is out of the way, and then in theory the blade moves through the log, slicing a neat 6mm off it. But in practice, this is what actually happens. As soon as the log is thin enough, light enough, it jumps up and falls through the gap in front of the blade, the throat. This is potentially disastrous because unless it falls all the way through, it's likely to get hit full force on the cross grain by the blade. And if that blade doesn't cut right through in one go, then something somewhere else has to break. Oh dear. The other potential big problem is that small pieces of wood hop about and end up facing in the wrong direction. It did sort of work though, most of the time. You can see how much effort is needed though. It's just like using a hand plane to try and plane off a 6mm thick shaving. Of course, Richard's Swedish machine in the video works perfectly. But then he is using knot-free green spruce, which might be easier to slice through than old turnips or cheese. I need my machine to be able to cope with any old thing I throw in there, because I'm not actually trying to make shingles, of course. I don't have suitable timber, and it's just too wet here in Ireland to use them on a roof. But I'm trying to use the same principle to make kindling size pieces for my charcoal making project. But the way the last piece behaves is a major problem. This time it fell right through, but that was just luck really. And this is another potential problem. A piece has become wedged tight under the end stop, potentially putting huge pressure on the frame and the blade. Also, sometimes the blade won't bite at all, depending on the shape of the log. It's just not biting, is it?
Not biting, no.
If I give it a little bit of pressure. Holding the log down seems too dangerous, so we tipped up the blade slightly, and that helped a lot, using washers underneath the back edge. At the same time, we closed up the throat a bit. Throat width is a tricky thing. You can't afford to restrict the shaving, but it's vital for curling the shaving out of the way. As you may have noticed, all this time we've been pushing and pulling directly on the carriage. It was very hard work. So we connected it to the big wheel, which was the plan all along.
Okay.
Whoa, geez, it felt a bit like...
Bit of a wobble there.
But this meant lifting the wheel off its frame, and we waited until my son Liam had arrived all the way from China to help. Nothing's happening, Will.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, be patient.
Oh yeah. Ooh. Oh. Good.
Oh, it's still recording.
It was great to have him here for the last 10 days or so, but he's gone away again now. With the frame removed, we could get the new eccentric into position using spacers
the extra
to
ones
keep
that
it
we
away
put
from
in
the spokes.
here, so then these ones should stay the same diameter, shouldn't they? So they should. Or maybe that one is going to be a problem.
Okay, moment of truth. Spinning!
Press it. No.
Just about now, I realised I'd screwed up in a big way. You see, I'd aimed for the eccentric to move in and out by 18 inches, an 18-inch stroke. So I'd offset the cam by 9 inches, as you do with a crank. 9 inches of movement on one side plus 9 inches on the other would make a total of 18-inch stroke. It hadn't occurred to me that eccentrics just don't work in the same way as cranks. They only move on one side of the center line, as discussed in the last video. And so the total stroke was only 9 inches, half of what I wanted. So obvious in hindsight, but in my defense, it was the first time I'd ever made one. It's a real shame because it looks pretty good and it seems to work fine. Just doesn't move very far.
Hit him, slow down.
Now I could just make a larger one, or I could use a lever as an exaggerator or multiplier to get the stroke length that I need. But I thought before I do any of that, I'll just use it as it is for now and make sure I can get the rest of the machine working properly first. And using the con rod to pull the blade made a big difference, much smoother and easier. But the same old challenges remained.
Sounded like it was working quite well for a while there.
And then what we predicted would happen happened.
Spun around and
It stood up
Yeah.
the last bit. But it was good though.
It sounded like, well, it's working.
It's actually working. Yeah.
Plus a new one.
Whoa!
That heavy table was just lifted up into the air whenever the blade met something it didn't really like. We experimented with holding a longer log at an angle, but that didn't work very well either.
It's a huge twisting force.
So it looks like we do need to arrange the logs in line with the blade stroke and not let them spin around somehow.
Whoa!
We raised up the front of the table to improve the angle of pull and braced it more firmly against the wheel frame, but it just found something else to get stuck on.
Whoa! Interesting. Oh, it's self-turned.
Self-correcting.
Keep going. See what happens.
And we still have the problem of up-tipping. Imagine if the wheel was being driven by the engine at this point.
Ooh. Oh man, what happened then?
I don't know, the whole thing looked like it lived in the air to me, but
It's all a bit scary, isn't it?
it is.
Cup of tea time.
So then we bit the bullet and attached an enormous steel girder right through the table and directly onto the wheel frame. Surely This will stop the table rearing up in the air like a mad stallion. Surely. And actually that did improve things considerably. Mind you, this is green willow and only 9 inches long. Handy if you wanted to shingle a doll's house, but perhaps not that efficient. But I did think we were making progress.
Ooh. Success! Stop! It's just hopping about. It's all. It's just hopping. Okay. We've made a roly-poly machine. Whoop. Okay, let's not go that way. Let's go that way then. Yeah, but it didn't really take off a lot. Ooh. In the horrible mud. Take one of those penny arcade things and nothing actually happens.
The stop end positions are critical to allow the log time to fall down with each new stroke, and it took 2 of us to spin the wheel for this larger log, but it did work, mostly.
Good. It's very little leeway
Yeah.
to let it drop down, but if it drops quick enough, it catches. Oh, now look. See, that's serious. It's expecting to cut through 1 inch thick.
So I took the carriage apart again and beefed up the throat so it couldn't open up anymore under pressure, and actually closed it up some more. The theory is that if the throat won't allow anything wider than 12 millimeters into it, then the most the blade might have to cut through is 12 millimeters, and that might not actually break things even when it's a cross-grained knotty piece. I also tipped up the blade edge another 0.5 millimeter and stiffened up the stop ends and secured them firmly in the right place. And I added an anti-spin bar to keep the logs in line. And all that does seem to have made a difference. Basically, it all now seems to work, which is really exciting. I'm so tired now, but it's really exciting, really. Yes, of course, the logs are very short and the slices are quite thin. Not too thin, but quite thin. But those things can be changed if it works under full power from the engine. So I want to set it up outside before I try changing anything else. In the meantime, I have made lots of kindling, which is great, isn't it? And it's only taken a few months and a ton of steel and wood. Happy days.